welcome.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. Tonight, we'll continue with our Bhakti Shastri course, studying the Nectar of Devotion, one of the four main books of the Bhakti Shastri course. And tonight, we will continue with chapter 8, which is a very interesting chapter. Because in chapter 6, we began to hear about how to discharge devotional service. So 64 ways were given on how we can perform devotional service. 64 items of bhakti. In chapter 7 is called Evidence Regarding Devotional Principles. So the first 18 principles were broken down, and there is discussion and evidence surrounding each of those principles. And now chapter 8 is entitled Offense Avoided, because as we discussed, devotional service has two areas, vidhi and nisheta. Vidhi means positive injunctions, or things that we should do or must do in order to perform devotional service. And then there is nisheta. Nisheta means things that we must avoid in order to perform devotional service, to make it successful. Because if we do the negative things, they will detract from our ability to receive Krishna's mercy. In other words, they are displeasing to Krishna. So there are things we must avoid and things we must accept or adopt. Based on the overarching instruction, which is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. How do we always remember Krishna? By doing the things that will please Krishna. How do we forget Krishna? By doing the things which we should avoid, or which are offensive to Krishna, or which make us forget Krishna. So tonight, chapter 8 is dedicated to the 64 things will be mentioned that we need to avoid. 64 different types of offenses that we need to avoid in devotional service. It's important for us to understand these things, because if we don't understand properly, as much as we need to understand the things that we should do to please Krishna and how to please Krishna, it's just as important to understand the things that we need to do, or the things that we need to avoid, which will make us forget Krishna. That's just as important. Otherwise, we could be, Prabhupada gives the example, I might have mentioned this in a recent class, that the wedding party, they jumped into the boat, they started rowing the boat because they were going to row overnight to arrive further down the river to attend a wedding the next day, but someone forgot to take the anchor out. So they rowed all night. The sun came up the next morning and they hadn't made any progress. And Prabhupada gives this as an example that devotional service can be like that. You can be doing the right things, but if you're simultaneously doing the wrong things, committing offenses, then you're not making progress. So that's why the Nectar of Devotion is called the complete science of Bhakti-yoga. It's a science. And a science means you have to follow the formula to get the result. If we don't follow the proper things, the proper parts of the formula, you don't get the result. So that's why Rupa Goswami has compiled these lists for us to understand, because they're very important. So the first 20 items of the 64 are called Bhakti Dwara, which means they're the gateway to devotional service. 10 things that you need to do and a certain amount of things that you need to avoid. So now we've got to the next item, which is emphasizing that we should avoid offenses in devotional service. So now there's a whole chapter about this. Very important subject matter. I've taught this chapter as a standalone class many times, as a mini seminar many times. I haven't done it for a long time, but 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I've taught this a number of times. Very important. The 19th item of Sadhana Bhakti is the sole subject of chapter 8. Seva nama parada vajanam. One must carefully avoid the various offenses in chanting the holy name and worshipping the deity. Because abhinitva nama namino, the name of Krishna and Krishna are non-different. So if you're offending Krishna's name while chanting, as we said, you can be chanting the holy name, which is very good, but if you're committing offenses, you're not making progress. So we have to understand what the offenses are. Similarly, in worshipping the deity of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. So we don't have deities here at Hare Krishna Valley, but in Melbourne Temple, we have many deities. Have you been, Nat? Have you been to the temple? Oh, okay. Well, we need to organize that soon. Yeah, we need to organize that soon.
Yes.
Yeah, follow me up on that, and we'll organize it.
Will do.
So, the deity of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. So therefore, we have to be careful not to offend the deities of Krishna. Very important. Srila Rupa Goswami makes an important point about seva aparad. Seva aparad means, seva means service, offenses while doing service to the deity. By citing the Padma Purana, one should not allow himself to become neglectful in deity worship, thinking that the holy name will deliver him from his offenses. Chanting the holy name, this is from page 72 of the Nectar of Devotion, chanting the holy name will deliver one from all offenses. But if one willfully employs the name in this way, he offends the name and thus neutralizes its effect. An offender to the holy name has no chance of deliverance. So Prabhupada's making a very important point, that if you think that you can do deity worship Krishna, and then be slack or inattentive while doing the service, and possibly offend Krishna while doing the service, you possibly make offenses to Krishna, and you think, oh, that's okay, I chant, so then I can go away later and chant, and while I'm chanting, that will neutralize the offenses. That's effectively like using Krishna as a doormat. In other words, you just wipe your feet and you move on. And no one likes being treated like that. I don't like being treated like that. None of us do, because we're all people. People don't like being mistreated. So Krishna doesn't appreciate that mood. That, oh, I can offend him, I can be lackadaisical in my service, and that's okay because I'll just chant and it'll all be nullified. No, it won't. So we need to understand these points. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the introduction, there are two categories of devotional service, devotional activities, pravritti and nivritti, positive and negative actions. Avoiding offenses is an example of nivritti or nisheda, which means negation of activities that hinder our proper meditation on Krishna. As explained in chapter 2, the point of performing all devotional activities is to increase and inspire our remembrance of Krishna. Keeping this in mind, sorry. Keeping this in mind will help us resolve any apparent contradictions. For example, Regulation 21, not to eulogize or praise anyone before the deity, and Regulation 30, not to fail to offer praise in the presence of the spiritual master, appear contradictory. If the spiritual master is present before the deity, it seems unavoidable to commit one offense or the other. However, we can easily resolve such contradictions by keeping the proper perspective and seeing the regulations as aids for respectful remembrance of Krishna. Out of regard for the deity, we may choose to praise the spiritual master in our minds, perhaps with discreet gestures or respect, or we may choose to openly praise him as the Lord's servant for the deity's pleasure. Neither is an offense, because they both ensure respectful remembrance of Krishna. The essential thing is to glorify Krishna and no one else. One can directly glorify Krishna or can indirectly glorify him by glorifying his servant. So these are some examples. There are nuances in these, understanding these offenses and applying them and trying to avoid committing them. So I will begin to read chapter 8. So we're going to go through the whole chapter, which means there are 64 items which are mentioned, 64 offenses to be avoided. So we will go through them, and then there's the 10 offenses against the holy name, which we'll also cover. So there's a lot in this chapter. If you have any questions or comments as we go, then please ask. In the supplementary Vedic literature, there is the following list of 32 offenses in the matter of serving the Lord. So I'll elaborate where I feel it's necessary, and if you have any questions on the nuances of these particular offenses, then just let me know. One should not enter the temple of the deity in a car or palanquin or with shoes on the feet. So we don't wear shoes into the temple. We all know that. Why? Because one reason is because shoes are dirty. So we want to keep the temple clean. Secondly, when you don't wear shoes, you're taking a humble position. You're acting in humility. When we go to the holy dhams, to Mayapur, Puri, Vrindavan, I always say to the devotees, if possible, don't wear shoes the whole time. And as much as possible, I try to follow that. Not wearing shoes, because it keeps you in a humble state of mind, not wearing shoes. And you have to be conscientious, because you have to always be looking where you're stepping. And so it keeps one in the humble state of mind. So we enter the temple in that state, as a humble servant of Krishna. Also, it's unclean. That's why in the Vedic civilization, in the Hare Krishna movement, we don't wear shoes inside. We don't wear them in our ashrams and our houses. We don't wear them in the temple. The only place we wear them is the kitchen. And technically, like in the Melbourne kitchen, because we have very high standards, more so than here, we don't wear shoes which are worn outside the kitchen. We only wear kitchen shoes in the kitchen to maintain that standard of cleanliness. And one should not enter the temple in a car or palanquin. Previously, Maharajas and Maharanis, great kings and great queens, they would be carried in palanquins. Yeah, you may have seen in movies like Cleopatra. Men pick up, and Cleopatra sits in the palanquin. They pick up the poles, put them on their shoulders, and the slaves walk. So this was a practice in Vedic civilization, that prominent or important personalities would be carried in a palanquin. So I don't think any of us fit in that category. But if you do, you have to get off your palanquin before you go into the temple, because there's only one God. There's only one. When you're in the temple, the focus should be on Krishna. So it's inappropriate to, we could say, like, steal Krishna's thunder. In other words, it's not appropriate to accept a position of superiority in front of Krishna, or accept honor or worship unnecessarily in front of Krishna. Krishna is the topmost personality, and respect should be focused upon him. So that's why you wouldn't go into the temple in a palanquin. Number 2, one should not fail to observe the various festivals for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such as Janmashtami and Ratha Yatra. So it's an offense not to observe these festivals. In the Hare Krishna movement, we have many festivals. Next Wednesday, actually, is Nrsimha Chaturdashi, the appearance day of Lord Nrsimhadev. So, because it's Nrsimha's appearance, we won't have class next Wednesday. I mentioned that last week. Because we'll be observing the festival for Lord Nrsimhadev. So any of these major festivals, and we have many in our movement, 6 or 8 major ones, I would say, something like that. We should not be neglectful of these festivals. We should stop everything and observe them as much as possible. Because it's an offense not to observe the festival. I mean, if it's unavoidable, like sometimes the devotees, they can't get out of work or something, then maybe that's excusable. But generally speaking, if at all possible, we must observe the festivals. We must attend the festivals. So in the Vedic culture in India, it's accepted. Like, I was in India recently for Holi, and they just have a public holiday, so everyone can observe the festival. It's just accepted. Everyone's going to not go to work. And we have those festivals in the West. We have Christmas and Easter, which people don't really follow anyway. But in our tradition, we should observe these festivals very carefully. Number 3, one should not avoid bowing down before the deity. This is important. When you come into the temple, you must bow down before Krishna. Why do we do it? Because it shows our surrender. When you bow before someone, you're showing that person is, how do you say it? Superior. You're showing your respect to that person. You're showing your dependence and submission to that person. So bowing down constitutes 9 parts of the body touching the ground. That's what we call obeisances, dandavats. When you bow down, your forehead, your 2 hands, your 2 elbows, your 2 knees, and your 2 feet must be touching the ground. Right? And that's considered proper and respectful obeisances. So we have to make sure that when we bow down fully and properly. Whenever we go into the temple and whenever we leave the temple. Whenever we come before our guru, our spiritual master, and when we leave his presence, we must bow down. When you come into the temple and you see the deity of Krishna, you must bow down. When you're leaving, you must bow down. That's the etiquette. So we have to follow those things. Number 4, one should not enter the temple to worship the Lord without having washed one's hands and feet after eating. So, if you eat, you have to wash your hands, your mouth, and your feet before you enter into the temple. You're not considered clean. I did a whole seminar on cleanliness. You can watch it on YouTube. We did it many years ago. So there's a whole criteria about the standards of cleanliness within the Hare Krishna movement. So it's not appropriate to do anything, actually. You're not considered clean if you've eaten, you haven't washed your hands, your feet, and your mouth. So you cannot enter the temple or engage in worship of the Lord without having washed your hands, your feet, and your mouth after eating. Also, when you pass stool, I explained this in the cleanliness seminar, that if you go to the toilet and you pass stool, you're unclean. You have to take a full shower before you can then enter the temple room or the kitchen, the deity's kitchen. There's a whole system behind our cleanliness. You have to put on fresh clothes, or you have to take off the clothes you're wearing, take them off, put on another cloth, a gamsha we call them, or a towel or something. But there's even a science behind that. And then we go and pass through, we have a full shower, then we go and get dressed again, then we re-enter the temple or the kitchen. So these are standards that we must follow. If we don't follow them, then we're committing offenses in our devotional service. If you want to know the details on cleanliness, look at that cleanliness seminar. That's a whole seminar in itself, all the different rules and regulations about cleanliness. Number 5. One should not enter the temple in a contaminated state. According to the Vedic scripture, if someone dies in the family, the whole family becomes contaminated for some time, according to its status. For example, if the family is a Brahmana, their contamination period is 12 days. For the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, it is 15 days. For the Sudras, it is 30 days. So it says here that one should not enter the temple. Now, we have to make a clarification here. For example, many of you know what I'm talking about. If you've been to, Nat hasn't been there, so I'll have to explain it. But if you've been to one of the temples, like the Melbourne Temple or any of the temples, is the New Govardhan Temple, there's what we call the deity room, and then there's the Kirtan Mandap, or the temple hall. So when it talks about not entering the temple, it's talking about the deity room, to directly perform service directly to the deities. So if a family member passes, you're going to be disturbed for a period of time. So it's better you don't go directly in to worship the deity, because your mind will be, naturally thinking about your lamentation of losing your relative or someone close to you. And when you're with Krishna, you have to be thinking about him. But it's natural that, we may be distracted. So you should not enter the actual deity room at that time and perform worship for a period of time. You could even say, one time Prabhupada said, do not go before the deity in the temple room. So don't go before the deity unless you're happy. Prabhupada said that one time. He said, if you're not happy, don't go there. Krishna doesn't want to see your miserable face. You should be happy seeing him. So if your mind's too distracted, like if you're thinking, oh, I lost my girlfriend or I lost my boyfriend, or Krishna doesn't want to, he wants you to see him, forget about all that and concentrate on him. So if you're hankering or lamenting, if your mind is somewhere else, you shouldn't go directly you shouldn't go directly into the temple room. You should be focused on Krishna. So it means that, especially the actual deity room where the deities are, if you're serving them, if a relative is passed, then you shouldn't go for a period of time. You can go into the temple room, you can go and see Krishna, because that will be beneficial for you. But as for going into the actual deity room, then you should avoid that. Number 6, one should not bow down on one hand. So an example of when we go into the temple, and when we go into the temple, we may be chanting our japa. So if you go into the temple, you're chanting, and then you bow down on one hand because you should not put the beads or the japa bag onto the ground. That's also an offense. Anything holy, like the Bhagavad Gita or your beads or anything holy, should not touch the ground. That's an offense. And if you do that, you should touch the item to your head to relieve the offense, and then you continue on. So if you're chanting, you go in, you just bow down on one hand, that's actually an offense. You should fully surrender to Krishna. So better you just put your beads down, bow down, then pick them up and keep chanting. That's an example of how to avoid that offense. Number 7, one should not circumambulate in front of Krishna. The process of circumambulating the temple is that one should begin circumambulating from the deity's right-hand side of the temple and come around. Such circumambulation should be performed outside the temple structure at least 3 times daily. So it's an item of bhakti to go around the temple, to circumambulate the temple. What it's saying here is do not circumambulate someone else, because it's a way of respecting someone. You walk around them. It's a way of honoring someone. So, you know, in our temples, we worship Tulsi Devi. And after the worship, we all circumambulate around. So we do that after the deity doors are shut, so that we don't offend the deity, because you shouldn't offer respect to someone else in front of the deity. That's not appropriate, because Krishna should be the center. So therefore, we should not circumambulate in front of the deity. When the deity doors are closed, then we can do those things, such as we do with our worship of Tulsi. Number 8, one should not spread his legs before the deity. So in other words, you should not stretch your legs out. To show a superior person your feet is an offense. In other words, to point your feet, sit down and point your feet towards a superior is considered, it's too casual and it's an offense to that person. So we should avoid that offense. We should not commit that offense. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Prabhu.
Okay, I'm just checking. That's it. So, as it says here, don't spread your legs out in front of the deities. It's an offense to, you should sit cross-legged, as we do in the temple. If your legs are sore, then stand up, but don't stretch your feet out in front of the deities. Number 9, one should not sit before the deities holding his ankles, elbows, or knees with one's hands. It's very common in the West that we go like this. Everyone can see me okay? We go like this, which means, this is a posture of, it means you're casual. It can also mean you're disinterested. It can mean you're close. It can mean many things. So it's not appropriate while you're having darshan or seeing the deities in the temple to be standing like this. It's kind of like, hi Krishna. It's not appropriate. So, we stand like this, or we put our hands by our side, or we clasp them in front of us. But, it should be respectful. That's the point. You don't go before, the body language is not appropriate. Like if you're in front of the Prime Minister, for example, or someone important, you don't just stand like this. The body language is, it's disrespectful. Number 10, one should not lie down before the deity of Krishna. So this also means you should not fall asleep in front of the deity. Sometimes, when you're giving class, people nod off. So sometimes if they do that, I say, Prabhu, you're nodding off. If you're tired, go and sleep, but don't sleep in the temple. And we should never lie down in the temple. That's considered inappropriate. Number 11, one should not accept prasad before the deity. So we don't eat in front of Krishna. Right? We don't eat in front of the deity. This is not considered to be appropriate, that we just eat in front of the deity. It's not appropriate. It's too casual, and it's not appropriate. If you're in front of the master, you don't eat in front of them. It's not cultured. Right? You wait till they finish their meal, and then you'll eat somewhere else later. So we don't eat directly in front of the deity of Krishna. Number 12, one should never speak a lie before the deity. We shouldn't speak a lie before anyone. We should not lie. We should not be deceitful, but especially should not do it in front of Krishna. There are pastimes in Caitanya Charitamrita, for example, where devotees have done this. They lied, or they said something and later on they didn't follow it and it became a lie. We should avoid that in front of Krishna. Number 13, one should not talk very loudly before the deity. In other words, we shouldn't just have casual conversations in front of the deity. When you're in the temple room, you should focus on Krishna. When you're outside the temple room, you can talk. Sometimes I'm in the temple room with devotees and, someone's talking and then the conversation becomes a bit casual. And sometimes I'll say, let's move outside, because this is not, we can talk in front of the deities, but it means the topic has to be purely service-based. It has to be in connection with Krishna. And if it's not, then, we give classes and things in front of the deity. But if we're just speaking casually, like how are you doing and having a casual conversation, we should do that outside the temple. Number 14, one should not talk with others before the deity. Once again, this particular instruction is speaking about being directly in the deity room, not the kirtan hall or the temple room, but the deity room. You have to maintain silence while you're doing the worship. It's not appropriate to just have a conversation. Everyone should be focused on Krishna. One should maintain silence, actually. Number 15, one should not cry or howl before the deity. As we said previously, if you're disturbed, don't go into the temple. If your mind cannot happily or peacefully focus on Krishna, then we shouldn't go into the temple. Not appropriate to cry or, I mean, you might be crying over something spiritual. Maybe that might be permissible, but if you're crying over, I lost my girlfriend or my job or something like that, that's not appropriate to cry like that in front of Krishna. Number 16, one should not quarrel or fight before the deity. So that's obvious. Don't quarrel, don't fight in front of Krishna. Number 17, one should not chastise anyone before the deity. It's an important point. If you have to correct someone, do it outside. Don't do it in the temple and create a scene and create a bad mood. It's not appropriate. Number 18, one should not be charitable to beggars before the deity. In India, that's more common. People will beg. But when you're in front of the deity, you only give your donations to Krishna. You can give donations to others outside of the temple, but not in front of Krishna. Number 19, one should not speak very harshly to others before the deity. Number 20, one should not wear a fur blanket before the deity. So as devotees, we don't wear animal products. We don't wear leather unless it's ahimsa leather, unless the animal has died naturally. But if the animal's been killed, we should not wear leather just as a fashion item. Now there's so many vegan options as well. So we should not wear fur. We shouldn't anything where the animal's been killed. It's not appropriate to wear those things in front of the deity. I don't wear those things at all. I don't wear leather or fur or anything like that. It's not appropriate in the temple or outside the temple. I don't wear those things. Number 21, one should not eulogize or praise anyone else before the deity. So, as we said, when you're in front of the deity, you praise Krishna, right? If we're going to praise someone else, we should do that outside the temple. Number 22, one should not speak any ill names before the deity, which is obvious. Don't swear in front of the deity. 23, one should not pass air before the deity. This is especially in the deity room. If you're doing worship, you have to make sure you're not passing air. That's inappropriate. Number 24, one should not fail to worship the deity according to one's means. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Lord is satisfied if some devotees offer him even a leaf or a little water. This formula prescribed by the Lord is universally applicable, even for the poorest man. But that does not mean that one who has sufficient means to worship the Lord very nicely should also adopt this method and try to satisfy the Lord simply by offering water and a leaf. If he has sufficient means, he should offer nice decorations, nice flowers, and nice foodstuffs, and observe all ceremonies. It is not that one should try to satisfy the Supreme Lord with a little water and a leaf, and for himself spend all his money in sense gratification. So, if you're rich, you need to be giving a substantial amount of money to Krishna. Otherwise, you won't become purified of that attachment. If you're poor, you should give something to Krishna according to your means. Just like Ambarish Prabhu, who is Henry Ford's grandson. He's given $30 million plus to build the TOVP, the great temple in India. That was Prabhupada instructed. He's very wealthy. Prabhupada instructed him, use your wealth for that purpose, and he's doing that. And he just sent a letter out the other day to the whole movement. They're doing a special campaign at the moment to raise more funds to finish the temple in Mayapur. And he said that he will match dollar for dollar. So if they raise $1 million, he'll put in $1 million. So he's very generous. That's how we should be with our wealth. Number 25, one should not eat anything which is not offered first to Krishna. That's called prasadam. We should only eat prasadam, or the food which is offered to Krishna. Otherwise, Krishna says you're a thief. If you eat food not offered to him, you're a stena, or thief, he says in Bhagavad Gita. Number 26, one should not fail to offer fresh fruit and grains to Krishna according to the season. We talk these days, we talk about eating seasonally. Krishna's always done this. You offer Krishna whatever's growing. According to the season, it should be offered to the deity. The best quality food stuff. Number 27, after food has been cooked, no one should be offered any food stuff unless it is first offered to the deity. So we don't eat anything unless it's first offered to Krishna. Number 28, one should not sit with his back toward the deity. This is important. I see devotees do this, that, they sit, there's a class going on, the speaker's in the middle, the deity's behind, and sometimes the devotees sit with their back towards the deity. We should never do that. You sit with your back towards someone is disrespectful. Number 29, one should not offer obeisances silently to the Guru, or in other words, one should recite aloud the prayers to the Guru. So when you go into the temple and we're offering our obeisances to Prabhupada, for example, it should be audible. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti-vedanta Swami Miti Namane. We should not speak just silently, but we should actually, people should hear us. And the person we're offering our respects to should hear us. Number 30, one should not fail to offer some praise in the presence of the Guru. So as it says before, maybe not in front of the deities in the temple room, but we should always praise the spiritual master whenever we're with him. Number 31, one should not praise himself before the spiritual master or before Krishna. We shouldn't praise ourselves. 32, one should not deride the demigods before the deity. So it's inappropriate to glorify the demigods in front of Krishna. We should respect the demigods, but when we're in front of Krishna, we should glorify Krishna. This is a list of 32 offenses. Besides these, there are a number of offenses which are mentioned in the Varaha Purana. These are as follows. Number 1, one should not touch the deity in a dark room. In the temple, like in Melbourne, they have a ghee lamp, which is always burning 24 hours a day. So the deity is never in complete darkness. So we should never leave the deity in complete darkness. Number 2, one should not fail to strictly follow the rules and regulations in worshipping the deity. So it means everything we're reading here, we should follow this. Otherwise, it's an offense. Number 3, one should not enter the temple of the deity without first making some sound. So you see, like here at Hare Krishna Valley, at the Melbourne Temple, we have bells. So we should make some noise before it's like ringing someone's doorbell. You do this so that people can understand that you're about to enter. Number 4, one should not offer any foodstuff to the deity which has been seen by dogs or lower animals. So we should make sure that when we cook for Krishna, no one who is untrained should see the offering before it is offered to Krishna. Because if they think in their mind, this looks nice, I can't wait until I taste this, this is an offense to Krishna because it's for Krishna's enjoyment. Number 5, one should not break silence while worshipping, so we have to be silent. Number 6, one should not pass urine or evacuate while engaged in worship. So if you do have to go in while worshipping, go to the toilet, then you have to fully bathe yourself before you can resume the worship. Number 7, one should not offer incense without offering a flower. So if you offer incense to the deity, always offer a flower as well. Number 8, useless flowers without any fragrance should not be offered. So sometimes, we, while offering flowers, we have to make sure we find flowers that actually have some scent, which is becoming harder and harder in this day and age. Even sometimes you buy roses, there's no scent. So if there's nothing else, offer it to Krishna, but we should offer flowers that have a scent. Number 9, one should not fail to wash his teeth very carefully every day. So brush your teeth, scrape your tongue. I floss every day as well. So, keep yourself clean if you're worshiping Krishna. Number 10, one should not enter the temple directly after sexual intercourse. So sexual intercourse should be to procreate a child, to have a child, and that should be done at nighttime and not in the daytime. So you wouldn't have sexual intercourse, then bathe yourself, then go to see the deity. If you're trying to have a child, then you would have intercourse at night, bathe yourself, next day, then you would go and see the deity. That would be acceptable. Number 11, one should not touch a woman during her menstrual period. Traditionally, women would go to a private quarters for 3 days while they're menstruating, and because they're bleeding and blood is contaminating. So, they should not be in the public. They should rest during that period. And the men should not touch them so they don't become contaminated. Number 12, one should not enter the temple after touching a dead body. So if you've been to a cremation ceremony or a burial, a graveyard, you should bathe and purify yourself before you enter the temple. 13, one should not enter the temple wearing garments of red or blue or garments which are unwashed. So if the garments are not clean, you should not go into the temple. When it says red and blue, it specifically means in the deity room. It's not the temple room. Like, you can come to the temple wearing red or blue, that's okay. But if you go in to worship the deity, because blue is the favorite color of Lord Balaram, Lord Nityananda, so we should not steal their thunder. Red is Radharani's color, the color she wears. So if we're directly in the temple room, we shouldn't wear those colors. It's not respectful. You should let the superior people wear those colors. 14, one should not enter the temple after seeing a dead body. 15, one should not pass air within the temple. 16, one should not be angry in the temple. Some of these are repeated. 17, one should not enter the temple after visiting a crematorium. 18, one should not belch before the deity. So until one has fully digested his food, he should not enter the temple. 19, one should not smoke marijuana or ganja. 20, one should not take opium or other similar intoxicants. 21, one should not enter the deity room or touch the body of the deity after having smeared oil over his body. So don't oil yourself and then go and touch the deity. You have to be freshly clean. Oil is considered not clean. We should oil our bodies, but not just before we go to worship the deity. 22, one should not show disrespect to a scripture teaching about the supremacy of Krishna. So if you disrespect any of the statements of the scripture, that's offensive to the deity. 25, one should not offer a flower which was kept in an unclean pot. We go through that in our cleanliness course. Don't collect flowers or paraphernalia for the deity in something that's unclean. 26, one should not worship the Lord while sitting on the bare floor. One must have a sitting place or a carpet. 27, one should not touch the deity before one has completed taking bath. So make sure you're clean before you enter the temple room. 28, one should not decorate his forehead with the 3-line tilak. We wear Vaishnava tilak. 29, one should not enter the temple without washing his hands and feet. So some of these are repeated. Other rules, Prabhupada says, one should not offer foodstuff which is cooked by a non-Vaishnava. So if, for example, you can't buy a vegetarian pizza and then offer it to the deity because it's not cooked by a devotee. You can only offer things to the deity which are cooked by devotees. One should not worship the deity before a non-devotee. That's why we put the curtains up and we worship the deity behind closed doors. One should not engage himself in the worship of the Lord while seeing a non-devotee. One should not begin the worship of the demigod one should begin the worship of the demigod Ganapati or Ganesh. So we should worship Ganesh, it says here, which is nice because we have Ganesh here at the farm. Because it will drive away impediments in devotional service. Of course, Prabhupada explains here that Ganesh gets his power from Nrsingadev. So in ISKCON, we don't worship Ganesh directly. We worship Nrsingadev and he removes our obstacles. The deities should not be bathed in water which has been touched by the nails or the fingernails. Nails and fingernails are considered contaminated, so you shouldn't touch the water which you're going to bathe the deity's body with your fingernails. If you want to test the temperature of the water, you touch it with the back of your hand. When a devotee is perspiring, he should not engage in deity worship. It's very difficult in places like Mayapur where it gets very hot. For example, one should not cross or step over the flowers offered to the deities. So don't step over anything which has been offered to Krishna. One should not take a vow in the name of God. You can't say to Krishna, I vow I will do this, because maybe Krishna doesn't want you to do it. If you're going to take a vow in front of the deities, you better make sure. Like when we take initiation, we take vows in front of the deities. You better make sure you follow them. It's not a small thing. In the Padma Purana, it is stated that even a person whose life is completely sinful will be completely protected by the Lord if he simply surrenders unto him. And then it says, even when a person, this is page 72, becomes an offender unto the Supreme Lord, he can still be delivered by chanting the holy names of Krishna, the Maha Mantra. So what are the 10 offenses while chanting? We read these every day when we finish Mangalati. For those who have been in the temple, we read the 10 offenses each day. These are the 10 offenses we have to avoid while chanting the names of Krishna. Number 1, to blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. Right? So to blaspheme the devotees. You can't please Krishna. You can say, well, I love Krishna, but I criticize his devotees all the time. Krishna is not, like if someone says they love you, but they're always criticizing one of your family members, it's very hard to like the person. So if you're always criticizing the devotees, Krishna is not going to be inclined to be merciful towards you. Number 2, to consider the names of demigods like Shiva and Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Krishna. So we should not think that, we can chant any name and worship any demigod and we will get the same result as worshiping Krishna. It is simply, it does not work like that. Number 3, to disobey the orders of the Guru. If you don't follow the Guru's orders, how will you please Krishna? Because the Guru is Krishna's representative. Number 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature in the pursuance of the Vedic version. So in other words, to read something in the scriptures or hear something in the scriptures, and then you say, that's not true. That's an offense. Number 5. To consider the glories of chanting the Hare Krishna to be imagination. So if we say, this is not true, that by chanting you can go back to Krishna, you can leave this material world, that's an offense if we don't believe in the power of chanting the holy name of Krishna. Number 6, to give some interpretation on the holy name. So to interpret it, to say, it's not as powerful as they say it is, that's an offense. Number 7, to commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. So in other words, if you say, well, I can do this sinful activity, but that's okay, because I'll just chant Hare Krishna. So if you say that and do that, then that's a great offense towards Krishna. You say that I can do material things, I can fulfill my material desires and commit sinful activities, but I'll just go and chant later and then it'll all be washed away, all the reactions. This is an offense to Krishna. Number 8, to consider the chanting of Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities often in the Vedas is fruitive activity. So in other words, I just chant and I'll become rich, or I chant, I'll get a beautiful wife, or I chant, I'll have a son. This is not the purpose of the chanting. So if you have that mentality, it's an offense. Number 9, to instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. So if you're trying to, someone who doesn't believe in these things and you keep trying to convince them, but they just continually criticize Krishna, you're committing an offense by doing that. Number 10, to not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So we have to give up that offense of maintaining material attachments, right? I have my material attachments. When you're chanting, you should lose your material attachments, not keep on acting on your material attachments. Okay. It is also said it is an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So if you're chanting, but you're not attentive, not focused while chanting, that's also a great offense. So we'll stop there. Next week we'll have Nrsingadev's appearance. So we'll have a class, chapter 9, we'll study again in 2 weeks. Does anyone have any final questions or comments on anything we discussed? Okay. We'll see you all soon. Thank you all for coming.
Hi, Keshava, I just couldn't press the mute button. I was
cool.
just wondering. I was wondering about what we're supposed to be learning, because there's a lot of different info, like a lot of the last 2 chapters and this chapter. There's a lot to be learnt. So I was just wondering what parts of it we need to be learning.
Just study everything, and then I'll do an overview class after chapter 19. And whatever I speak in the overview class, that's what you'll need to focus on for your exam. But at the moment, just read everything. Just try to absorb as much as you can.
But what about memorizing?
I gave you verses to memorize, so memorize the verses. Other things, you know, you don't have to memorize all the offenses, but
yeah,
what's that?
like the 64 items, how many of them do we need to learn? Like the first 10 or something, or?
Just be familiar with them. I mean, the 64 that we, you know, spoken of in chapter 6, you should be familiar with them. I mean, you've been in devotee for a number of years. You don't have to memorize them all, but you'd be familiar with most of. You'd be familiar with most of them. So just study them. When it comes
down.
No, it's not like that. You might have to write a few in your exam, but you won't have to write, dozens. It won't be like that.
Okay.
Then in terms of chapter 8, the 64 offenses, be familiar with them, but you don't have to memorize them. That's all.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll see you soon.
Okay. Hare
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
See you all soon.
Yes, sir, Prabhu.
Hari Bol.
Hare Bol.